Hello viewers, welcome back to our series of lectures on NMR spectroscopy. Today we will continue our discussion and talk about two things. One is equivalent protons and the other one is spin-spin coupling. Though the two do not go together, but we will try to make some kind of understanding about both the things which are very important to understand NMR spectrum and its applications thereafter. Okay. The session is planned as follows, that is, to begin with we will briefly review what we did in the previous session. Thereafter we will talk about the meaning of chemical equivalence of protons. We will try to talk about the criteria which can be used to find out whether the set of protons are equivalent or not. Thereafter we will move on to the concept of spin-spin coupling. What do we mean by that? How does it happen? And in this context we will talk about the concept per se and then move on to different types of systems. We will take some systems and then see what kind of coupling comes into picture. Then we will try to put the things together in form of some kind of a rule. Having done that, we will talk about coupling constant. That is a kind of a measure of interaction between two different kind of nuclei which are in the neighborhood of each other, and then towards the end we will try to sum up what we do in today's session. Okay. So, with that kind of an outline, let us go and quickly recall what we did in the previous session. What we did in the previous session was we started by stating Shulray's additivity rules and discussed their applications with the help of examples. Thereafter, we continued our discussion on the factors that affect chemical shift, and in this context we talked about the nature of hybridization of carbon atom to which the proton is attached. Then we talked about a very significant factor that happens to be diamagnetic anisotropy. We talked about variety of systems and we talked about anisotropy due to sigma bond, pi bond systems and conjugate systems and things like that. Thereafter, we took up hydrogen bonding as another factor which affects chemical bonding. We talked about how does hydrogen bonding cause shift in the chemical shift position and what kind of concentration dependence in certain cases there of intermolecular hydrogen bonding. So, that is all what we done in the previous session. We will continue from here and move on to the meaning of equivalent protons there. Why do we talk about equivalent protons is that we know that from the earlier sessions we will recall, we know that in NMR spectrum the number of signals what we get there, they actually give an indication about the different types of protons in a given molecule. What do we mean by types of protons? Because what happens is all protons which are equivalent, they are given type, they will come together. So, if there are say 5 signals in the NMR spectrum, that indicates that there are 5 different types of protons in a given molecule. Let us take some example here. We know that we have seen the spectrum earlier too, that of ethanol. We know that ethanol gives us 3 signals there, one for the methyl protons, one for methylene protons, one for the hydroxyl group or OH protons there. And if I take an isomer of that is dimethyl ether, it gives me only one signal because all the 6 proton happens to be identical, they are equivalent to each other. So, that is the meaning of equivalence. We will talk more about it as we proceed. Now, what we see here is the question comes up is, if I know that in my NMR spectrum the number of signals actually is indicative of the number of types of protons we have. If I just take the opposite part of it, if I want to predict how many signals do I expect in the NMR spectrum of a given molecule, how do I go about it? For that, essentially it amounts to finding out how many equivalent protons are there in the given system there. So, the question is, how do we predict the number of signals in NMR spectrum of a molecule? So, that is what we are going to address now. Okay. Now, so what we do is we define chemical equivalence of proton as the set of protons having identical electronic environments, because we know that the chemical shift position of a given proton is determined by the electronic environment around that. So, all protons having identical electronic environment will have identical chemical shifts there. So, that is the basic premise on which we define what is called as chemical equivalence of the protons there, or chemically equivalent protons as such. Now, for this to be done, there are 2 sets of criteria we have. The first one is that suppose a set of protons are bonded to atom and they are free to rotate at given room temperature over there, then they are said to be equivalent. We will talk about it as we just move a little further. And the second criteria happens to be by some kind of symmetry relationship. That means the presence of an axis or plane of symmetry in the molecule. So, there are two criteria which make it very easy to ascertain whether the set of protons are equivalent or not. Let us look at these two criteria. The first one is free rotation around the single bond over there. Let us take this example here. This is a very simple molecule. This is methyl acetate. In case of methyl acetate, what we find is there are a total of 6 protons here. We can see here there are 3 protons in this methyl group over there, and then 3 over here which are bonded to an oxygen atom over there. Now, if I look at any of these 3 protons there, this methyl group is free to rotate around this single bond. Carbon oxygen bond is single bond here, and these 3 protons are free to rotate around this. Since they are free, they all are equivalent in one way. Similarly, so are these 3 are equivalent. And if we look at the NMR spectrum of this molecule, we find we get 2 signals there. One signal here, that is HA, marked for these kind of protons over there, and HB is the signal for the protons such as marked as HB here. Because we can see here that since this methyl group here is attached, linked directly to oxygen atom, that is why its chemical shift is high here. That means the delta value is large, it is downfielded there because of the electronegativity of oxygen atom over to which this is bonded here. So, that is one criteria, that is if your protons are free to rotate, then it will be equivalent to each other. That is the criteria number 1. And as I just mentioned, the spectrum of methyl acetate gives you 2 signals there. Okay. Now, the second criteria is with respect to the symmetry relationship. Let us see what it is. What it says is, if a given molecule, if the set of protons I am talking about, they are related by some kind of a symmetry operation, either rotation or reflection, then they are said to be equivalent there. But we need to understand what do we mean by symmetry operation. I am sure that in your first year courses in solid state, you must have learnt about symmetry operation there. Let us quickly recall the meaning of symmetry operation. Symmetry operation basically refers to some kind of a non-translational movement which, when performed on a body, leaves the body in a position that is indistinguishable from its original position. What it means is the following. That means, suppose I have some molecule here, say I have water molecule. Water molecule we know is there is an oxygen atom in the center and there are 2 hydrogen atoms attached to that. Now, if I take a water molecule and I ask you to go out of the room, and in the meantime I rotate the molecule by 180 degrees, you come back and then I ask you to look at the molecule again and tell me whether did I do anything to this or not. You will not be able to work out that, because this is indistinguishable from the previous molecule what we saw there. So, if that so happens, then we say that this is a symmetry operation. That means a given body before and after the operation should be indistinguishable. So, that is the meaning of symmetry operations. I am sure that I would request you to recall what we done in the solid state there. Okay. Now, let us get back to our application of symmetry operations in the present context of the protons being equivalent or otherwise. Let us see that. Let us see the meaning of rotation symmetry. Rotation symmetry basically refers to rotating a molecule by a certain angle around an imaginary axis. Let us take an example here. Let us look at this molecule of propane here. In this molecule of propane, we know that there are 8 protons there. There are 3 protons of methyl group here, 3 this terminal methyl, and then 2 are methylene protons there. Now, if I look at these 2 protons, I have purposely tagged them here. They are all protons only. Now, if I imagine a axis over here, which is given by a dotted line here, and if I rotate this molecule by 180 degree, so what I get is this picture here. These 2 are indistinguishable. If that is so, then we say that this molecule exhibits rotational symmetry, or in other words, we can say that these 2 methylene protons are related by rotational symmetry. Since they are related by rotational symmetry, they are equivalent. The sets of protons I am talking about here, which are related by rotational symmetry, are equivalent, and they are called as homotropic. Okay. So, that means what it means is that any sets of protons in a given molecule which are related through rotational symmetry are equivalent and are called as homotropic in nature. Let us look at the spectrum of this molecule here. So, what you see is that this signal is for the methylene protons of the molecule we just talked about. So, we find that they are coming together, they are giving me one signal. what we find here is the signal is quite complicated one. What is this complication? That we will be taking up little later there when we talk about the spin-spin coupling there. Let's look at this molecule of ethanol here, and just think of this imaginary plane here, which is shown over here. What you find is, if I look at these two protons here, the methylene protons here, that means the first one which is towards you and the one which is going away from you, these two are related to reflection symmetry. That means this proton is a reflection of the one behind it, and the one which is behind it is a reflection of this one here. So, we can see that if I reflect this molecule through this plane, I can't distinguish between the molecule after the reflection and prior to that. So, this essentially means that this molecule contains an imaginary plane, or called as a mirror plane there, and this kind of a symmetry is referred to as reflection symmetry. So, these two methylene protons, which are related or interchangeable by reflection symmetry, are equivalent and are called as enantiotropic in nature. Okay. So, they are equivalent enantiotropic, and the ones which are related by rotational symmetry are equivalent and homotropic there. Now, there are certain molecules in which the protons are neither homotropic or enantiotropic. That means they are non-equivalent, and such protons are called as diastereotropic there. Let us take some examples here. Say a molecule of butanol here. In case of 2-butanol, what you find is that these methylene protons, which are slightly shaded here, these are the ones which are not related either through rotational symmetry or through reflection symmetry, and such these two protons are said to be diastereotropic there. Okay. So, they are non-equivalent protons there. Now, having talked about the criteria for ascertaining the equivalence of protons in a given molecule, let us look at a flow chart here to find out whether the protons are equivalent or not. The first question we have to put forth is, that is, are these related by some kind of a symmetry axis? If the answer happens to be yes, we can straightway say that these protons are equivalent, and such protons are referred to as homotropic in nature. And if the symmetry axis is not there, then we have to put another question there. Is there any symmetry plane which relates the two protons? Again, look for the answers, and if it happens to be yes, then we say that these protons are equivalent again, and they are referred to as enantiotropic. And if they are neither related through symmetry axis or symmetry plane, we got diastereotropic protons which are non-equivalent there. So, primarily this flow chart actually gives you a summary of what we just discussed regarding different kind of criteria there. Okay. Let us move further. Let us move further and talk about the main theme of today's session, that is spin-spin coupling. Interestingly, as I mentioned in the introduction here, spin-spin coupling and the chemical equivalence of protons do not go together, because in spin-spin coupling will happen only when the protons are not chemically equivalent there. If they are equivalent, they will not couple. So, that kind of a contrasting topics are there for today's session here. Okay. Let us continue. Now, what basically is spin-spin coupling? To understand that, just try to recall again. We know that the number of signals in a low resolution spectrum of a molecule is typically equal to the types of equivalent protons in the molecule. Look at this spectrum here. This is a very sketchy spectrum of ethanol molecule. In case of ethanol, as I have been telling repeatedly, that there are three kinds of protons. One is the terminal methyl, methylene, and hydroxyl group there. So, each one of them gives me one signal, and that indicates that these three protons are of three different types. So, that's the kind of spectrum I get at the low resolution. But if I take the same molecule and run the spectrum at high resolution, means I am using a much sophisticated instrumentation, say I am talking about a 200 megahertz or 300 megahertz or 100 megahertz instrument, and look for the spectrum there. The spectrum looks something like this. So, what you find is, it is again there are three kind of signals there, but you can now say there are three sets of signals, not three signals per se, because in the earlier we had one signal each. Now, what you find is that in this spectrum of high resolution NMR, we find that the signals here, most of them they get split. They split into two or more signals, maybe 3, 4 or even 7, or maybe much more than that also is possible. This kind of a splitting, this is because of the nature of the protons which are in the neighborhood of the protons there, and this is referred to as spin-spin coupling or spin-spin splitting. That is what we are going to take up now. Now, in the light of this, as I just mentioned, that this splitting is because of the magnetic influence of the neighboring protons, and that neighboring protons in kind of influence this or cause this splitting because of their some kind of magnetic behavior. We will be talking about it as we just proceed from here on. Okay. So, we can just put some kind of a definition to this term here, that is splitting of the NMR signal for a proton in the molecule into two or more signals due to its interaction with the neighboring protons is called as spin-spin coupling or splitting. Spin-spin coupling or spin-spin splitting are the terms which are used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. Splitting actually is a consequence, coupling is a cause. Coupling is, that means there are two protons that are interacting, that interaction or coupling is a cause, and because of that coupling there is a splitting in the lines there. Okay. Now, such protons are said to be magnetically coupled because the magnetic influence of each other is causing this kind of a splitting there. The splitting occurs only if the neighboring protons are non-equivalent. That is very, very important to us. And if the protons are equivalent, they will not split each other. So, that is a very, very important thing which we have to bear in mind there. Okay. So, with this kind of a little background or introduction to what is the meaning of spin-spin coupling, let us look at some systems here. Let us look at this molecule 1,1-dibromo-2,2-dichloroethane. That is the structure of the molecule here. Now, with whatever little we have understood so far about the chemical shift and its the factors affecting it, we can try to see that in this molecule here there are only two protons here, which are been indicated with two different colors here. We find that this proton and this proton are going to have two different chemical shift positions there, because this is attached to a carbon atom attached to two chlorine atoms, whereas this proton is attached to a carbon which are linked to two bromine atoms there. So, this bromine and chlorine have got different electronegativities, and we know that as from our earlier understanding that this proton is going to come downfield. The signal is expected somewhere here, the dotted line is shown over here. We expect the signal to be somewhere here, some value. I am not putting any numbers over there, and this proton is expected to show the signal high field, relatively speaking there. Okay. So, that is what I expect. Essentially, since there are two protons, if the two protons do not talk to each other, do not interact with each other, then what do I expect is this will give me one signal of this kind, this will give me this signal here. But what happens is, because these protons basically are magnetic entities there, they are tiny bar magnets, we know that, and since they are bar magnets, they are going to influence the behavior of this, that means this proton is going to influence the behavior of this proton and vice versa. In the applied, this B naught happens to be the applied magnetic field here. Okay. Now, let us understand. Let me see that if I am trying to focus my attention onto this proton here. When I am looking at this proton, then this proton can have two possible orientations here, and they happen to be either aligned with the field or against the field. That means, now when I am trying to look at the shift position of this proton, and this proton is either aligned with or against the field. If it is aligned with the field, means this proton now is experiencing more field there. That means, it will come to resonance at a signal will come at the low field side, because I need lesser field for this, because this field is being augmented from here. Similarly, if this proton happens to be having this orientation opposing the field, I need to apply more field or more frequency to get the signal here. That means, and we know that in a given sample almost 50% of them will be in this orientation, another 50% will be in opposing to this one. So, they are roughly equal to each other. As a consequence, what I get is, instead of the signal which I expected initially on the basis of the electronegativity principles there, I find that I do not get one signal, instead I get these two signals there. This is not observed. I get a two-line spectrum over there. Similarly, now if I focus my attention onto this proton, then this also is a tiny magnet here, and this also has two orientations, one aligned with the field or against the field, and thereby this will also give me two lines there. So, for this molecule, the spectrum will look something like this. That means, there are two lines here and two lines over here. That means, this two-line spectrum is called as a doublet. So, we get two doublets in this case, as against two single line spectra or two singlets over there. So, this is the meaning of spin-spin coupling. That means this spin has coupled with this and vice versa, and both of them have got the spectrum to be splitted there. Let us take another example. Let us take a second case of 1-bromo 2,2-dichloroethane, this molecule here. Now, what do we have? We have almost similar situation here. We got one proton of a given kind which is attached to carbon attached to chlorine atoms, and there are two protons which are attached to a carbon attached to a bromine. And here again I would expect that this will give me a signal somewhere here, and this is expected to give me signal somewhere here. And second thing what you can note here is that this signal is coming because of just one proton, and this signal is because of two protons. So, this is slightly more intense there. This is my expectation here. They are not the spectra I am going to get here. This is where do I expect the signal to be coming on the basis of the electronegativity of the substituents here. Okay. Now, let us try to again go through the same exercise. Let me try to focus attention onto this proton. When I am looking at this proton, these two protons can behave because both of them are tiny magnets there. So, there are different possibilities. What can happen is both these protons, they can be aligned with the field, or there is a possibility that one proton is aligned with, one is against, or this is against, this is with, or the third possibility could be both of them are against the field here. So, there are a number of possibilities here. What happens is if both of them are aligned with the field, let me say that one alignment gives me certain magnitude of shift over there. That means, since now both the protons are aligned with the field, so they are going to augment the field significantly. So, as a consequence what happens is because of these two things, they are going to add to my applied field there. So, the signal will come at downfield here, much more shifted than in the previous case. And if I look at this possibility here, so one with, one against. So, whatever this adds to the field, this takes back. So, there is no net effect on the field here. So, both these orientations there, both these possibilities do not do any kind of effect onto the applied field there. That means, from these possibilities there, when suppose I am talking about 1,000,000 molecules there, in 1,000,000 protons, there are 250,000 will have this possibility, 500,000 will have these two options there, and another 250,000 will have this possibility there. So, when this situation prevails there, that means almost 50% of molecules will have this situation here. So, the signal will come at the same position there as it was expected there. There is no effective shift in the applied magnetic field there, or there is no influence or effect on that. There is no decrease or increase of the applied field. And the last possibility, when both the protons are opposing the applied field, the signal will come at high field side. So, that means this signal which I expected as one line here, it gets split into three possibilities there. So, I am getting a triplet, 3-line signal is called as a triplet, and what you find is that the intensity, this will be 1 unit, this will be double of this, and this will be again single, because this is coming because of this possibility, 1/4 of the species there. This is coming because of 50% of that, because the two put together give me the double signal, and this signal will me the signal of this intensity there. And when I am trying to look at these two protons here, then this is the same situation as before. So, one is either aligned with or against, and the spectrum will look like this as before. So, what you find is that in this case, when I took this kind of molecule, that means there is one proton having two equivalent neighbors, then they give me this kind of a situation here. Okay. That means they give me a 3-line spectrum. Let us take yet another case. Let us talk about 1,1-dichloroethane. In this case, what do I have is, I have one proton as before, which is attached to carbon atom, attached to 2 chlorine atoms, and then it is just a methyl group here now. So, all the three are equivalent protons, and then what do I do is, I have as before one signal expected for this proton, one signal for all these protons somewhere here. Arbitrarily I put this value here, and again the intensities give me the indication about the numbers there. This is one proton signal here, and this is because of the 3 protons here. Now, I continue with my same story. Look at this proton. When I am looking at this proton, now there are 3 protons in the neighborhood whose magnetic influence can cause changes in the behavior of this particular proton there, and what are the possibilities? The possibilities could be like this, that is, all the 3 protons are aligned with the field, or another possibility could be that 2 are aligned with the field, 1 is against the field. So, in this case these 2 are aligned with, this is against, and so on and so forth. Third possibility could be 2 are against the field, 1 is with the field. So, there are 3 such possibilities here. And the last possibility could be that all these 3 spins are opposing the field here. So, what you find is that these are all possible combinations there for these 3 spins to be there. Now, how do they influence the field here? So, in this case these 3 protons which are all aligned with the field, so they will add significantly to the applied field. That means, because of this possibility, the signal will come far to the left of this, that means far downfield from the expected signal here. And these 3 possibilities are there. These 3 are having 2 with the field, 1 against the field. That means effectively there is 1 with the field. Okay. So, each one of them has the equivalent influence onto the applied magnetic field, and they will give me a signal somewhere here. Then if you look at these possibilities again, we find that I get the signals of this kind. That is, this proton is expected to give me one singlet, one signal which I thought of. I am getting a 4-line spectrum here. A 4-line spectrum is called as a quartet. And another thing we have to take note of here is that the intensity of these signals here, the first one is just because of this one group of spins there, so this intensity is some 1 unit. This is the 3 equivalent possibilities are there, 2 with, 1 against, 2 with, 1 against, 2 with, 1 against. So, all of them will have equal probability. So, the probability of this possible combination is 3 times that of this possibility. As a consequence, I get this signal to be 3 times as intense as this one. Same thing will hold here also. So, this will be 1:3:3:1. So, I get a 4-line spectrum called a quartet and having intensity pattern as 1, 3, 3, 1. And again I am looking at all these 3 equivalent protons. This neighbor is going to give me 2 possibilities and 2-line spectrum here. So what we have seen here is I have taken 3 different possibilities. That is, I am looking at one proton and then looking at different sets of neighbors there. If only one neighbor, I get 2-line spectrum. If there are 2 neighbors, I get 3-line spectrum. If there are 3 neighbors, I get 4-line spectrum. If I can have 6 neighbors, I will have 7-line spectrum. So, that is the kind of generalization we can evolve from here. So, what we get is that if I got one neighbor, so I get a doublet. It is called as 1:1 doublet because both the signals are equally intense here. And if there are 2 neighbors, I get 3-line spectrum called a triplet. The intensity pattern will be 1, 2, 1. And if there are 3 equivalent neighbors here, I get a 4-line spectrum. This is called as a quartet, and the intensity ratio happens to be 1:3:3:1. And why of this we have just rationalized. I am sure that this is very clear to you all, that why do we get the kind of pattern we are getting there. Now, let us see that all this can be put together in terms of what is called as a n+1 rule. This is very simple rule here, that is, on the basis of analysis which is just done here, the splitting pattern can be extended to, you can continue with this, take more complicated systems. We find that in all such systems, the multiplicity, that is the number of peaks of an NMR signal which we observe, can be given in terms of n+1 rule, where n happens to be the number of equivalent protons. The 2 protons, I get 3 lines, 3 protons, I get 4 lines, 4 protons, I get 5 lines, and so on and so forth. So, that is what is called as a n+1 rule. This rule is applicable only when the separation of resonance lines of the interacting groups is much larger than the coupling constants. I will not be able to elaborate much, I just wanted to make a mention of it over here. The only thing here is that if the 2 protons, their chemical shift positions are very close to each other, then this kind of pattern will not be observed, because there are more complications come there which are beyond this level of understanding. But if the 2 protons are fairly separated, all this what I am just discussed with you, this hold true. Okay. Now, let us go further just to see 3 system here, 1 neighbor, 2 neighbor, 3 neighbor. If there are more neighbors, how do I predict what kind of intensity patterns will be there? That can be done very simply in terms of what is called as a Pascal's triangle. Let us look at it. That is how do we go. Start with 1 here, right, 1, 1 here, and then what you do is From here on, look at this is 1, 1, add the 2 together, this gives me 2. Then all these are 1 here, all these are 1s here. So what I see is, if there is only one proton in the neighborhood, I get 2 lines here, intensity ratio is 1:1. Now if I have 2 neighbors, so what you see is that this gives me 2. That means this 1 plus 1 gives me 2 here. Let us first tell you how to create this Pascal's triangle, then we will see the application of this. So we start with 1 here, 1 all around, same here, and then all these internal positions here we fill by the following way, that is, add these 2 together, these 2 terminals here, whatever comes is put over here, is 2. So 2 plus 1 will give me 3, this 2 plus 1 will give me 3, this 1 plus 3 will give me 4, 3 plus 3 will give me 6, and so on and so forth. You can do that. Now we can make use of it here. Suppose there are 3 protons. If there are 3 protons, you just come over here, the intensity pattern will be 1:3:3:1. If there are suppose 5 protons, intensity pattern will come down to be 1:5:10:10:5:1. You can do that. It is just a shortcut or a simpler way of working out the intensity pattern. Otherwise, you can continue doing the same way as we did earlier. You talk about all possible neighbors, try to find out different combinations and see what kind of intensity patterns comes there. And this basically is a mathematical, basically these are coefficients of the binomial expansion over there. Okay. Let us continue further and talk about a term called as coupling constant. What is coupling constant? We have just talked about coupling. That means 2 protons in the neighborhood, they are influencing each other. This influence is the magnitude of such kind of interaction is called as coupling constant. So the separation between the lines in the splitted signals in units of frequency is called as a coupling constant. It is denoted by J. That is what I am referring to here. Suppose I expected a signal here, but what I got is I got a signal here and here, I got a doublet. So the separation between these 2 signals now is called as the coupling constant. This actually is a measure of the extent or the intensity of coupling between the 2 protons which are interacting with each other. So it is a measure of the strength of the coupling interaction, and it is independent of the strength of the applied magnetic field. This is very, very important, because what you saw is when I discussed all these different kind of systems here, so applied field is there. So this kind of spin is aligned with or against the field, so it will have the same influence. If I change the field also, it will make the same influence onto the field. It will decrease or increase the field by the same magnitude. So the 2 are different there. Okay. Now in order to observe splitting, that is very, very important here, the 2 protons must be separated by at least 2 or 3 sigma bonds there. Let us take some examples here. Now suppose we have a situation of this kind. There are 2 protons labeled as HA, HB. They are basically on the same carbon here. In such cases, they are called as geminal protons. That is a typical term used for such protons there, which are on the same carbon atom. So the coupling, because if I just see this proton and this proton, they are related by 2 bonds there. This is one bond and this is the second bond here. So they are 2 bonds away from each other. So it will be observed only they are not equivalent. If they are equivalent protons, the coupling is not there at all. Second possibility, the most commonly observed coupling is between what is called as the vicinal protons. Vicinal protons are the ones which are related like this. That means you have got 2 neighboring carbons there, one proton, say HA attached to this carbon atom, HB to this one, and if I look at this, this is 1 bond, 2 bond, 3 bond. So this is a 3 bond coupling. This is the most predominant kind of coupling which influences the spectrum, which causes spin-spin splitting and the kind of spectra we get from NMR. Third possibility, if you look at this, suppose these 2 protons are there. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 bond. This 4 bond coupling is very weak. This is called as a long range coupling. Beyond 4 and beyond normally is not observed. But suppose the system happens to be a rigid system, there is a possibility of this kind of interaction coming into picture, but not very often observed over there. Now if you look at this molecule here, this molecule, if you look at, this is 1,2-dichloroethane. In this case, these 2 protons and these 2 protons, they are actually related by symmetry. They are equivalent protons, so they will not split at all. So in this case, no coupling is observed because the protons are equivalent here. So, as I mentioned earlier, the basic requirement for the interaction to take place is the protons must be non-equivalent. That means the two sets of protons, these protons say on a given carbon atom, they must be equivalent, but these, the one on carbon atom number 1 and the one on number 2, they should be non-equivalent from each other. Okay. So, in this case we do not expect any kind of a coupling coming over there. Okay. Now, this just some kind of a magnitude, just to have an idea about the kind of couplings we expect. So, typically this kind of a vicinal couplings of the order of about 7 hertz, we can see that is very tiny coupling, very small magnitude over there. And if you got some kind of a cis protons here like this, it is about 10 hertz there. Trans is much larger one, the magnitude is much larger, it's about 15 hertz, and so on and so forth. All textbooks will give you a huge list or tabulation of different kind of coupling constants, because they are very, very important tools in the hand of spectroscopist to use NMR and try to infer information about the molecule there. Okay. Now, let us look at some characteristic splitting patterns here. Say ethyl group. Ethyl group is basically CH2 CH3. Since there are CH2 CH3, now we can see that if I look at CH2 protons, so there are 3 neighbors to that. So, I get a 4-line spectrum here. And if I am looking at CH3 protons, there are only methylene group is there, neighborhood over there. So, 2 protons are there, I will be getting a 3-line pattern there. So, that is a kind of spectrum I expect there. Why I am talking about this is because these patterns are, one should get used to these patterns, because they are very, very handy in trying to interpret NMR spectra there. So, this is a theoretical pattern expected from a ethyl group, but what is actually experimentally observed is this. Experimentally what you observe is a pattern which is slightly different from this one, and this also is, it gives a very, very important indication to the kind of molecule we are dealing with here, is because whenever the 2 protons, the 2 sets of protons interact, they cause spin-spin splitting or spin-spin coupling. We find that if you look closely at this signals here, we find that here I expected it to be 1:2:1. Fine, it is roughly 1:2:1. What we find is that the first line here is little more intense, this is lesser intense there, it is going upward like this. And on this side, if you see, this is a methylene proton over there. So, it is supposed to be 1:3:3:1, but what you find is that this signal happens to be slightly larger than this one, and between these two, this happens to be slightly going upward here. So, what you find is this signal has tendency to go upward, this has to tendency to go like this. So, if you have to identify this kind of patterns there. So, this tells me that these 2 sets of protons are interacting with each other, because I am just taking a simple molecule here, but if it is a large molecule, in a large molecule, if there is an ethyl group. So, this is one indication which we have to make use of to see that whether these 2 spins are interacting with each other, are they ethyl group or not. You may have this kind of situation there, because there are 2 very, very important things. One, this is slightly more involved indication there. Second thing which you have to look forward to is, that is the coupling constants. Suppose I am talking about coupling between methylene proton and methyl protons of ethanol here. So, if the coupling constant happens to be say 7 hertz here, it is 7 hertz here also. They influence each other by equivalent magnitudes there. Now, in this pattern here shown here, it looks like kind of a ethyl group there, because this is a quadret here, there is a triplet here. The intensity pattern may be matched there. What you find is that these lines are much closer, the J values is much smaller here, the J value here is much larger. This is a misleading pattern there, this is not ethyl group there. So, for a given set of pattern there, that means a 3-line, a triplet and a quadret here, 2 proton quadret and 3 proton triplet put together gives me ethyl group there only if their coupling constants are matching, else it may be a misleading pattern there. We will be using this more often when we talk about when we discuss how to interpret NMR spectrum, maybe in the next session or so. Isopropyl group is another possibility. Isopropyl group is, we got CH, CH3, CH3. So, there are 6 neighbors here. So, the 6 neighbors will give me one proton which I got 6 neighbors will give me a pattern of this kind. It is a septet here, the 7-line pattern there, and the intensity ratio we can work out from the Pascal's triangle there, and for 6 protons I will get a doublet because it has got only one neighbor there. That is a typical pattern we will be making use of. Another could be of tertiary butyl group. because of tertiary butyl group there are 9 protons which all are equivalent. So, we get a very intense signal as a singlet over there because there is no neighborhood over there. So, all will come together at one signal there. Another thing which we have to just make a mention of it here is that coupling constant is independent of the strength of the applied magnetic field, as I mentioned earlier also. Let us look at this picture here. This spectrum is at 60 megahertz instrument and this is at 100 megahertz instrument. So, what you find is that the chemical shift positions remain the same. So, this is 1.08 ppm, 3.57 ppm, same is true here also, but the coupling constants do not change. It is 7 hertz here, 7 hertz here also. That is very, very important. Let us now sum up what we have done today. What we have done today is we briefly reviewed the contents of the previous session. Thereafter, we explained the concept of chemical equivalence of protons and shared the criteria for their determination and discussed in detail how do we use that criteria. Having done that, we explained the concept of spin-spin coupling and discussed the coupling in different types of spin systems there, say one neighbor, two neighbor and so on and so forth. And then we kind of explained the meaning of coupling constants and stated the values for different coupling constants for different kind of systems over there. With this, we have kind of covered wide variety of the basic aspects of NMR spectroscopy. Maybe in the next session, we will take up a few more issues and then we will try to talk about the kind of how do I make use of all this information put together to interpret the NMR spectra of some simple systems to begin with. Thank you very much.